I'm Wendy Brickman of Brickman Marketing, and welcome to the Brickman Banter Show. Today is my very, very special guest. I'm so pleased to have Dick Guttman. He's founder of Guttman Associates, a top celebrity PR firm in Beverly Hills, and author of an incredible book everyone has to read called Starflacker, and it's about the golden age of Hollywood. Welcome, Dick.
Hi, but do me a favor, spell Flacker for them.
Start with?
Spell Flacker for them.
Okay, and we'll probably have it online, but it's www.starflacker, STAR, F as in Frank, LACKER.com. And what's so kind of you is you can, and I've told a lot of friends who are buying your book, by the way, that you could download a few chapters from that website, right?
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was very kind of you. So let's start out by your telling us a little bit about your early background and how you ended up in the field of public relations as a press agent.
Okay, well, I was a film student at UCLA.
Right.
But my minor was psychology, and I did much more in psychology than film. And because at that time, they were teaching us to be film teachers or documentarians. They said it wasn't a trade school. They weren't trying to teach us to get in the business. So we had to form Delta Kappa Alpha, which was a film society. And I started to bring George Stevens and people out to UCLA for that. And finally, they got the idea. They weren't very happy about it. But I had always trained to be a journalist. But UCLA didn't have any journalism.
Right.
So I had like 5, 6 majors, and a friend of mine said, come over to film. It should be fun. And I did. But I was still basically trained as a journalist. And so one time I lost my job. I was working the 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift at the airport loading airplanes going to school. I lost that job because they found out I was a student. And so I was going to any place that the Student Bureau of Occupation sent me. I go to this company in Beverly Hills, Rogers and Cowan, and it seemed nice enough. I thought they had something to do art because they had all those cheap Musée d'Art Moderne posters all over. And I was putting things in envelopes and delivering things. And one day I ring the doorbell and Kirk Douglas answers. And I think, Kirk Douglas, what is it these guys are doing? I never heard of publicity. And so I went back and I started reading the memos I was distributing. And I thought, well, I know how to do this. This is journalism and this is film. Those are two things I know.
Right.
So I got the copy boy job, and there was one guy there who was quite a pro, and he saw that I'm a pretty good writer, and he saw that I could do that, and so he was helping me. And he says, you got to. The first rule is you got to make your break. You got to make your break. You create something that don't wait for it to come. So at that time, the biggest star in Hollywood was Jack Webb. It was at the time of
Dragnet.
Dragnet. Yeah, Dragnet. And but he was just big. He had turned everything around, and he was a movie star too. He was in Sunset Boulevard. But he made directed a movie called Pete Kelly's Blues. It was about his favorite subject was jazz and blues, and so he made this. And it had all these great musicians, Peggy Lee, Ella Fitzgerald. It was terrific music, not that good a movie. And they didn't know what to do with it. And they were going to lose Jack Webb as a client because I'd read these memos. And I said, we're going to lose him. You don't know what to do with the film. So I went to the music department at UCLA. I was still going to UCLA.
Schoenberg Hall.
Give me that 600-seat theater, and I'll bring Jack Webb in to do a seminar on jazz, and he'll bring all these great. I can't promise you how Peggy Lee and Ella Fitzgerald. There's the chances there. They got behind it, so I take it in, I write it up, give it to this guy who was promoting me. He gives my presentation to Warren Cowan, who basically invented public relations in Hollywood, and Warren takes it to his partner, senior partner, Henry Rogers, and gives it to him. And Henry Rogers turns to Warren and says, let me get this straight. You want to put our clout client in the hands of the office boy. And Warren said, you have a better idea? And so they let me go with it. And we get there. Uh, Jack came with all the musicians, and when they arrived, there were 800 people in the 600. The fire wardens weren't kicking them out; they wanted to see it too. So it just was madness. And Jack gave such a beautiful presentation. The music was spectacular. It was a great evening. The audience was going crazy. And so uh, after it, Warren goes back. He says, "Jack, we can get out the back." He said, "No, I want to work my way through them." He was eating up that audience. And so we get to the bus, and he turns to Warren. He says, "Warren, I never thought I'd say this to anyone but a beautiful woman, but you just gave me the greatest night of my life."
Oh,
So I was press agent. I had to hire me then.
wow, that's great. You showed chutzpah with that.
But actually, I could have taken it further. They were so relieved to save their biggest client that they let it go. I didn't know better, but a year later, what I would have seen was you take the show and you put it on the road. You take it to Kansas City and New Orleans and Chicago and New York. You put it on for charity, and you're selling this movie. That would have sold the movie, which didn't get sold. It went out and it did not much. But I didn't know. I wasn't that aware that I could extrapolate that in my mind.
Well, I would say everything's a learning curve, and we have the Monterey Jazz Festival here.
Oh, you think it's sensational. I handled the Monterey Film Festival once, and it was
right. Okay. Right.
I got a chance to work with Jimmy Stewart. That was
right. I remember him vividly. So I want to start out by also asking you, maybe there's some favorite times in your career as a press agent for so many top Hollywood celebrities that you would want to talk about. There was an example. Do you have another one? And then I have some other questions, of course.
My problem is I have probably about 342.
Well, you have, and let me just show the audience. You have, is this part one of the book, Starflacker?
I didn't, after I finished it, I figured it was a terrible act of ego to make a 670-page book, but I didn't want to leave things out.
I agree.
What I wrote was actually twice as big, and maybe sometime I'll pull that out.
Yeah, I want to read it. No, there were so many incredible stories, and it just brings it to life. And also, you could sit it down. You didn't have to read in one.
Well, the story of my life was timing, because I timed it it wasn't the tail end of the golden age, but it was smack dab in the middle of it. And the golden age was golden because they had, everybody talked about these monster movie magnates, the guys who ran the studios, like Harry Cohns and the Goldwins and the Jack
Zanuck.
And it was true. There were, Goldwyn was sort of an amusing monster, but he was still a monster. But they abused, they were autocrats, but they loved movies. They loved making good movies. They knew that they had to develop great stars, build them. They could build them by casting them in this role and that role. And if Kai Powerfeld had a film that was a clinker, Daryl Zanuck put him into Blood and Sand, and then suddenly he was the romantic star of the Western world. And they developed great directors. I was going to do a chapter on the directors that were there for that. And I went through this list of directors, and I had 242, and I was only on the letter M. They were incredible. And actually, one of my great thrills is I got to handle all of these great directors too. And people like Louis Milestone, who did All Quiet on the Western Front, and Billy Wilder. Billy Wilder was really sort of the architect of my life too, because I was lucky enough to work on Love in the Afternoon, and that changed my life.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that was sort of, when you talk about the golden age of Hollywood, what years are you thinking about?
I think the golden age was from about 1934, because they were building, they would have a Preston Sturges, a writer, and a Billy Wilder, and then they realized that if they can write, they can direct. And suddenly you had this flow of sensational directors and great writers, and they were responsible. And then they recognized a built talent. I handled Dan Johnson. I really loved Dan. He was so he was sort of distant and sweet, and but he was built up. He would go do fencing lessons. They gave him all the attributes of stardom.
Right.
They were actually one of my favorite moments was during the 60s. I represented a lot of the great comedians. That was the decade where they had all the comedy albums.
Yeah, we bought them.
And so I had one of these comedians up in San Francisco. Gisela and my wife and I went up because we were going to see him. I'm just losing his name, but he was. They were all very neurotic, and so the worst thing in the world was to have to listen to their new album with them watching.
Right.
It was torture.
You have to laugh.
We walk in and he says, "Oh, I want you to listen to my new album." So Gisela had never experienced it before, and you have to laugh madly when it's all amusing, and they would be judging you. They go, "Oh," or however you responded. And when we walked out of there, she said that was an ordeal. And I said, so as we went on, he said, "Are you coming to both shows?" I said, "No, I have Van Johnson is doing Bye Bye Birdie at the St. Francis, and we'll be going there for Van Johnson, the Red Shoes, the Red Sox, the last time I saw Paris. He's my favorite. I love him. You think maybe he could come to the midnight show?" I said, "Look, he gets worn out, but I'll ask him." So Van, we'll see him afterwards. Van, I was at Shelley Berman. I said, "Shelley Berman, you're his god. It's the Red Shoes. The last time I saw Paris, he would make his career if you would go to this tonight." "Oh, Kitty, I'm so tired." "No, you got to be there. You have to be there at midnight." We're there 10 to midnight. There's no Van Johnson. Shelley Berman's in the wings looking to see if he's gotten to the
Neurotic.
10 after midnight, he has to come out. There's no, at 15 after midnight, Van shows up. So Shelley's relieved now. He's really winging it. And the Van sits down and they come over and they say, Mr. Johnson, some complimentary champagne. "Thank you so much." He tastes it and he says, "I'm sorry, it's flat." And Shelley's watching this. They've just given flat champagne to his god. And they bring another one back. "It's flat too." And the third one, they come back and they pour it for him. As he's bringing it to his mouth, Gisela, my wife, reaches over, puts her hand over the glass and says, "Van, if this is flat, I'm pouring it over your head."
She's great. She's great.
Oh, yes, it was wonderful. It was good.
That's great. Right.
You could have with these people because you could play games that just their eccentricities were extraordinary. James Mason was probably the most interesting because he was very cruel. I mean, he was a wonderful guy, but he would be cruel in his humor. One time he called me he was doing Lord Jim in Thailand. He calls me at 3:00 in the morning. "Yes," he says, "Dick, I have this photo shoot tomorrow. I don't like the clothes they have for me for it." I said, "You're calling me about that at 3?
What are you going to do about it?
You're at the office." I said, "Then why did you call my home? You know it's 3 a.m. and I'm not talking to you, slam." And I heard that laugh from him. It was just incredible creatures. And I mean, one of them, probably the most dignifying, was Greer Garson. She was just an extraordinary person. And my mom's favorite person, not actress, my favorite person in the world. Mrs. Miniver was for her the quintessence of what motion picture art was. So, and I don't think I was a very good son, and I caused her problems. But at one time, I'm driving her someplace, and I said, "Mom, do you mind that we're going past Bel Air? I have a client. I'm going to drop something off the driveway. I'm just going to go." And we can pull into the driveway, and I go in, and Greer answers the phone. She said, "Dick, how wonderful you're here. It's Saturday. Come in." And so I said, "Greer, I'm sorry, my mom's in the car. She's with me." So my mom's sitting there, and there's a tap at the window, and Mrs. Miniver is, "You're in for tea." And it made up for all the terrible.
Yeah, right. Right. All the things you did over the years to her. No, they're very special people, and they know it.
Yeah.
But some of them are kinder than others. We'll put it that way. right?
Some of them acted the role that they were playing, and but others, but James was he was just a mischievous guy. There was a time where there was this big um, political uh, uh, scandal in London where they had these girls that were being passed around like lollipops, and so all the media wanted to talk to the British actors, most of whom I handled, and
Right. That's
nobody wanted to go near it. And so I called James. I said, "Look, maybe you want to do this, or they want to talk to you about the such and such exposure." And he said, "No, I'm playing tennis at the Beverly Hills Tennis Club, at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Have them come over, whatever they want." So, James, what do you think about this new scandal in London? He said, "Throw the old scoundrels out, bring the new scoundrels in." That was all the headlines for James Mason, saying, "Throw the old scoundrels out, bring the new scoundrels in."
he sounds remarkable.
No, he was incredible. His divorce from Portland was from Pamela was very scandalous, and we were at the you couldn't park when you got there, so we always took a limo. And as we were driving back one evening after part of the trial, we're going past the Beverly Hills Hotel. And in those days, they had newsstands where they had big headlines of what the news is, and people stop and buy the paper.
Sure.
Go there, we see the Herald Examiner, the Herald Express had a headline that said, "Mason accused of habitual adultery." That was a headline across the whole paper. And I'm so shocked. And then James did his little scoff and he said, "Well done, Guttman."
Yeah, right. You earned your money that day, getting him in the press. Hey, you were above the fold, right?
Yeah, it was, but it was fantastic. We burned down, we lost a lot of things in the 93 fire. The one that killed me was he had done a portrait of me, writing lies about him, while my alter ego in heaven was holding our pet alligator who had unfortunately died. And then underneath it said, "Mason done this for Guttman with admiration and affection." And
Oh,
I had brought it home to have it framed and that night.
that's sweet. Now you got to take pictures of your pictures before another mudslide. So let me ask you this. How did you handle working on, this is one of my professional questions. How did you handle working on helping to obtain Oscar nominations for multiple clients at the same time in the same category?
Well, when I started at Rogers and Cowan, at one point, it was a company I did with Jerry Pam, and it was Guttman and Pam was kind of an empire too. We had most of the European clients and really good clientele. But when I was at Rogers and Cowan, the old picture from MGM where it says "more stars than in the heavens." Rogers and Cowan had more stars than MGM had.
Well, you did something right.
I was 21 years old and I was working with Jane Wyman and these people who were
legends.
They were acting icons, and it was so extraordinary. But I got used to it. I got to the point very quickly where I wasn't afraid of stature. You have to do that, and that served me very well. But because of that, one time Rogers and Cowan had 4 of the 5 actor nominees, and I'm handling. It was Tony Curtis and
they have to buy your book. They have to buy your book to find out the other 3.
I remember with Sidney Poitier, with the film he did with Sidney Poitier, and what we would do is divide it up. So
divide it up.
Friends was Maximilian Schell, and because I handled all the German stars, but Max was a friend, and he was nominated for Judgment in Nuremberg, as was Spencer Tracy. So we didn't really feel he was going to win. And Paul was nominated. Paul Newman was nominated. One of the great people of all time, apart from being a great actor, just a great guy. And Paul was nominated for The Hustler. Certainly deserved the Oscar. They all, that was everybody should have got.
That's the problem.
But so I took Max because he was a friend, and somebody else took Paul, and Max won. And
the campaign was better.
no, I don't know what it was. Max wasn't a very big role in Judgment of Nuremberg, but he came as a big surprise. It was a different kind of acting. Most of the acting was sort of actor studio. He was very romantic, dramatic, and that caused some problems with not with Paul, but with his entourage. But another time with Paul was I was at a lunch with some other PR people, and they said, there's a story about you that I always wanted to find out if it was true. One of these press agents said. I said, a story about me? What could that be? He says, well, it was about Paul Newman asked you to see his movie and asked what you thought, and then you told him and he fired you. I said, that never happened. That wasn't Paul Newman. And then I suddenly remembered WUSA was a film that meant a lot to him because it was the first film about right-wing radio becoming a big power in America.
Here we are today.
But that was ahead of the time. And it was the whole cast were my friends and clients, Cloris Leachman, Larry Harvey, Tony Perkins, Paul, Joanne. It was, I cared about that film because I loved everybody in it. And so Paul runs it for me at Paramount. Just the two of us. Comes down and he says, okay, what did you think? I don't want to tell him what I thought. And I said, well, Paul, I think what we can do is all these great songs by this Neil Diamond kid, we can take those. You and Joanne will send that out to all the media. And he says, cut the crap. He says, tell me what you think, and don't tell me what you think I want you to think. I said, yeah. He said, yeah. I said, okay, who am I pulling for? That's the worst thing you say. If you're not pulling for somebody, why are you watching the movie? And he knew it was true. And he said, thanks. And so I drove back to Rogers and Cowan, and I walked in. They said, Mr. Cowan, my boss, wants to see you right away. So I go in, and Warren is sitting there. And he says, I just got a call from the producers of WUSA. You're fired from the film. They don't want you working on it. We're working on it still. They don't want you on it. Well, I actually continued to do it. But I said, really? I said, who told you this, Paul? He said, it doesn't make any difference. I said, no, I want to know, did Paul call you and tell you that? And he says, no, it was someone else. It was the producer. He said, what did you do? I said, well, Paul showed me the film, and he said, tell me what you think. Tell me what you really think. And Warren looked at me, he was sitting in his chair, and then he rose up like some sort of demon, and his hands were reaching for the ceiling and the sky, and he said, and you told him.
So, right. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't,
Because, Paul, I heard other stories where some actress was working with him on a film, and he gave her a tape of something he had done for Playhouse 90. He says, look at this and tell me what you think. And it was terrible. And so she came back the next day and said, what do you think? And she said, you're trying to trap me. It was terrible, Paul. What did you want me to say? He loved her. It was somebody that was telling him the truth.
Right.
He didn't tell him the truth.
Right. Which it's awkward. So another question. Creativity is part of PR, I think, and you do. I think you've staged events and maybe even publicity stunts. Do any specific ones come to mind?
About 1,000. But the two that I really cared about most were I was handling when I first started. We had a really fast, when I started my own company, we had a really fast rocket up because Fred Roos, who made all the films with Coppola, who went to UCLA with us, had done this, got Universal to make a movie of this kid, George Lucas. He had this idea, a film about kids. It was called American Graffiti. And they hated it. And so they didn't want to offend Coppola because they knew he was going to be doing great films. And they said, I tell you what, Francis, you put your own guys on this film. So we get this film, and handling it as the studio would have handled it. And right away I saw it was kids would go crazy. And I immediately knew that we were going to sell it through DJs all over the country. I was going to use them to open up the thing.
It's the werewolf. What was his name? Yeah, right.
Right?
I wanted to say the werewolf. What was it? The guy in American Graffiti.
Wolfman Jack.
Wolfman Jack, right.
The head of Universal said, what is a Wolfman Jack? Is this a horror film? They really didn't understand this film.
Right, because I said werewolf, right.
So I started getting the DJs to do screenings, and the film was taking off all by itself. At which point they fired us because they wanted it to be our success and wanted it to be theirs. But Candy Clark and some of the others came and wanted us to handle it. I got her an Oscar nomination, and Cindy Williams was a longtime friend and client, but not at that time. And she said, "Why did you get Candy an Oscar nomination, not me?" I said, "She asked."
She asked. Well, yeah.
I always said, I can't understand. Was that a 50s film or was that a 60s film? She said, we always thought it was 1950-12.
Right. It was such a great film, and you did a great job.
Well, the couple of them I really loved because we handled Gene Hackman. Just when we were starting, Gene had just done, I had touched him when I was doing Bonnie and Clyde for Warren Beatty. Warren calls me and he says, remember Gene Hackman from Bonnie and Clyde? I said, yeah, he's great. He says, well, he's in this new film called The French Connection. I want you to handle it. So this was like 2 months after I had started my company. So, of course, Gene wins the Oscar for it. But then he did another film with Francis called The Conversation. And Paramount, it was a Paramount film. Coppola had already done Godfather 1 and didn't win Best Director because I think Bob Fosse won for, probably was for Carousel, not Carousel, was it with Liza Minnelli?
Yeah, Cabaret.
Cabaret. And so in this one, they wanted to make sure that, Godfather 2 was a much better movie than Godfather 1, and they knew it. And they didn't want anything getting in the way. Well, Francis had squeezed in The Conversation before he started Godfather 2. And they were trying to ignore that. They didn't want it to get in the way. And so I told Fred Roos, get this film, I'm going to put this film in Cannes, and it'll get a face. And it won the Golden Lion or whatever it was, the Palme d'Or. And but still, Paramount was really afraid of it because it was going to be coming out at the same time as Godfather in the same year. They didn't want to screw things up. They knew this was a great art film, but it could get in the way of his getting all the awards for Godfather 2. So they opened it on the films open on Wednesdays, and they opened it on the Wednesday after the Academy Awards. So all that week, the papers would be filled with anything that won Best Song was going to have a full page. They were going to have this little ad for this little film conversation. And they booked it in the two biggest barns in town just to make sure it died big and visibly. They wanted it out of the way. And I saw the film, and I really loved it. And then we got closer to the Oscar season starting. They sort of told Fred to let me do what I could with it, but don't worry about it. So I'm sitting there, I have no idea how, nobody's seeing this film. Paramount is not showing it to the people in the industry. You can't vote for what you don't see. So I'm sitting there, there was, at that time, there was one channel in Hollywood, TV channel called Z Channel.
We subscribed.
Old classic films.
Yeah, it was great.
So I called them.
Because of you.
Sorry?
I said Z Channel was great because of you, because of what you did. I read about it.
Already great, because they had a guy who...
Jerry Harvey.
Yeah, thank you. He was a genius, and he did the booking on that. And on this one, he was very kind, and he turned over. And I said to them, I will give you a 40-minute interview with Gene Hackman. I want you to show this film 5 times, and I'll pick the times that when we show it. And then I get a call from Fred Roos saying, Francis doesn't want to do it. I said, why? I said, he said that he got a call from the guy who owns the cable station in Fresno. He's not going to play it if it goes on C Channel first. I said, find out for me how much that would cost you. He called back, he said $6,000. I said, that's 2 ads. You're going to do it. We're going to put this on. Because somebody sent me an ad and it showed where Z Channel was, and it was an overlay of the Academy. The Canyons, Beverly Hills, Bel Air,
Westwood.
Everywhere there was the Academy was where they showed.
Target marketing.
And so it went on, and nobody was really paying attention, but they saw it. And the nominations come out, and Godfather is nominated. Godfather 2 nominated Best Film, Best Director for Coppola. And Conversations nominated Best Film, Best Director for Coppola. And now Paramount saying, you've cost us $1 billion. This is terrible. And I said, no, I said, they're not going to vote for this film. They'll vote for Godfather because they know they can win. They know they can't win this. But people, this film's going to help Godfather. So Francis wins both of the films.
Good.
And I thought that Paramount hated me. And the next year I got a call and they said, we have a Ingmar Bergman film out, something of a marriage, it was Scenes from a Marriage. It was a 6-hour film. So they said, call the guy who invented art films in Los Angeles, a guy named Max Lemley, was playing in his theater, the Santa Monica, the Royal, and ask him if he'll do it. And I said, Max, how many audiences has Ingmar Bergman delivered to your door? And he said, why, what do you want? I said, will you let me show this on Z Channel while you're showing it there? He said, yes, because of Ingmar. And so we put it on, and I get this call from, it didn't get nominated, but I get a call from Max Lemley. He says, I want to thank you. I said, why? He says, you're showing this film on Z Channel. It's 6 hours, and the TV screens there were sort of oval. They weren't a square. And he said you couldn't read the subtitles, but everybody was pouring into the theater to see the film because they couldn't really watch it there.
Right. That's funny. We're just about out of time, and I want to just tell our audience that to hear more fantastic stories by Dick Guttman, you've got to read Starflacker, his book, and you can go to starflacker.com on the web, and you can download a few chapters to get a taste of it. But really, there's so many incredible stories. You've lived and continue to live an incredible life, Dick. Thank you so much.
Love those people, and I love the fact that you're holding this to your attention. This is not a book about me.
No, a little bit. All right. Thank you, and stay tuned.
Okay, thanks. Bye.